Welcome to the Climate Hive show. What do you solve? Where we sit down with global game changers on climate. I'm Kevin Drolet, aka Kedro, and I'm here with my Climate Hive co-founder, co-host, and good friend Mike Higgins, aka Higo. Our guest today is Benoy Thanjan, founder and CEO of Reneu Energy. He's also an advisor for several solar startup companies, and he has extensive project origination, development, and finance experience in renewable energy industry and in environmental commodities market. Benoy is also a fellow podcaster and host to the show Solar Maverick, celebrating over 200 episodes. Great job, Benoy. And today we're going to dig deep into the picture of solar and what that looks like. And for now, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Higo to kick us off.
All right. Benoy, great to have you on the show. Thanks for giving us your time.
Anytime. Thank you for having me. I'm excited about the content that you guys are creating, and we need more voices and promoting voices within the climate space. So I appreciate you doing this.
Well, thank you very much. So our show is really about the origin of the problem. And it actually starts, before the problem. It starts with the realization of the problem, right? So we call that the aha moment. So we'd love to begin with asking you about what was that aha moment that made you realize Renew Energy, needed to exist.
Yeah, there's been so many aha moments. But what happened was interesting. I started my career in energy at a company called Deloitte and Touche in their financial advisory services practice. And then I wanted to get more on the investment side, or what they call the buy side. And then I worked at a private equity fund called Ridgewood Renewable Power, and we invested in renewable energy projects, hydro, landfill gas, biomass. And then I started doing all this research on solar, and I was just getting really excited about solar. This is like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's like almost now 18 years. Shoot,
Wow.
time flies by when I'm thinking about 2007 to 2009. I was studying solar, and I'm like, this is going to be game changing. I mean, solar is a technology, not a fuel, and the cost keeps going down, and basically the capacity of these panels increase. So I told myself that I have to actually work at a solar company and then eventually start Reneu Energy. And I ended up working at a solar installer that does commercial, industrial, and utility scale called Vanguard Energy Partners. And then I worked at Solar City Tesla in project finance. And then I started their environmental commodities trading desk. And I thought that, hey, I could make even a bigger impact if I started Reneu Energy. And, we develop solar projects, commercial, industrial, community solar, utility scale solar. And then we've brokered about 40 million in environmental commodities transactions. We're currently developing a portfolio of 80 megawatts of solar projects in New York and New Jersey. We also act as an owner's rep. And it was just amazing how at that time people thought I was crazy that solar was going to eventually become economical, and now we see the cost declines are obviously been exponential. Solar is the newest and fastest renewable and energy resources coming online in the US and in a lot of other places. So it's been exciting to see, and most of my career has really been in energy and renewables, which now I'm considered, I guess, a dinosaur. Yeah.
Right.
Which is
I,
pretty funny.
I was wondering, like, because you have such a, you have such an interesting perspective just because you've been so much part of like financing big projects, you've had your hands on, you've worked at a number of companies. So you have this big view of like what's the solar landscape. And as we do this transition, what are some of the like the highlights for you, like in terms of where it's at, where you think it's going, like things also that might be, additional like aha moments for you of like, this is what's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many aha moments. So, like, thinking where to start. Like, I think the first thing that I said, and I know I said this in the beginning, is like solar is a technology, not a fuel.
Yeah.
So it's almost similar to, they have actually a formal term for it, to Moore's law in computing, with the processing speed and then the cost of the processor. it's going to come to me what they have for the law, but it's essentially that the cost of the panels are going to continue to go down and then be able to basically convert more sunlight into electricity. And then the other thing too is like storage, right? The big thing about, any of the intermittent renewable resources, especially solars, you can't use it when the sun's not shining, but batteries obviously change that. And then what we're seeing is like the same cost declines of solar, it's happening exponentially now with lithium ion batteries. There's also new battery technologies. I think in 2 to 3 years, you're going to see like exponential solar and storage deployment. And really, like in the US, I think, and I could be wrong, like solar only really makes between 3 to 5% of generation in the US. And I think you're going to see in a very short period of time, 10 to 15 to 20 years, where it goes up to, I think, 35, 40, 50% of the total generation of
Mhm.
electricity. If you think about like how many rooftops or open land spaces there are out there that don't have solar. That's like basically the market opportunity. So I think we're still very early in the energy transition and the
Yeah.
solar space, and it's going to happen a lot faster than I think I could ever imagine. And there's going to be more innovation, microgrids, new technologies that we haven't even talked about, or we don't even know. The incorporation of smart energy, using the grid dynamically, localized power. Um, Obviously AI, everyone's talking about, I could keep going on and on.
Yeah.
There's just so much innovation happening in the energy industry, which is pretty exciting. Modular, nuclear, microgrids.
right?
As it exists right now, I don't think that there's a cheaper alternative to electrical generation than solar as it stands right now, you know.
Yes, and I don't think they'll ever well, so and also the time period too where you could actually install from
Yeah.
actual because if like natural gas, which I believe with also the we're starting to see like power prices going up a lot. And then also the US is going to have an unsatiable appetite for energy. And we're going to need all fuel sources in the near future, even, fossil fuels. But even like putting new natural gas plants, like that'll take at least 6 to 8 years, where solar, I mean,
Yeah.
potentially you could do it depending on the type of project within a year or 3 years or 4 years. And then also, I think I was reading about how modular nuclear it will take at least 10 years
Yeah.
to basically, develop and build a plant. So it's exciting time, honestly, for being in the solar industry. And there's always seems to be some sort of innovation and um yeah, and also energy independence. That's something that I've been preaching a lot about
Yeah.
is um we're gonna have like more obviously climate related weather issues, fires and the grid going down because the infrastructure is
Mhm.
relatively old and hasn't been upgraded in the US, and having localized energy, especially as a homeowner and having storage, will keep you, secure. And I think, in the US, we haven't really experienced what other countries have when it comes to like consistently having energy, meaning blackouts. And I've done actually a lot of I'm part of a nonprofit called Let's Share the Sun, and we installed solar and storage in Puerto Rico a few weeks ago, and there was Puerto Rico, the whole island's been having blackouts
Yeah.
during New
Can,
Year's. And when we were there for
can,
one day, there was no power.
yeah, can
Hmm.
you talk a little bit about just your work with that nonprofit and why, how did that start?
Yeah, definitely. So Let's Share the Sun Foundation, they started in 2010. It's started by Bill and Nancy Jordan, and they're actually uh, basically installing solar and storage for people who have medical needs where they need 24-hour electricity. They've worked in Haiti. They received a grant in Puerto Rico. Actually, Bill owns Jordan Energy, which is a solar developer in New York. And how I found out about it was A friend of mine, John Moran, was on the board of Let's Share the Sun, and he was like, it'd be great to have Let's Share the Sun on the podcast, on my podcast, which is the Solar Maverick podcast. We've had them actually three times on the podcast, and it's been amazing, like how many people who and companies have heard the mission, and they've, based on the podcast, donated equipment to install the solar money and come on some of the trips that we've done. And this was actually my first time going on one of the trips to Puerto Rico, and it was a life-changing experience. Um, I think one of the big things was like meeting the families and hearing about like their medical needs, and then hearing about why electricity is so important. And unfortunately, like even before we got to install six residential solar system, there were two households where the people passed away before we were able to install solar and storage due to like blackouts. And I think this is something that a lot of people actually don't really know about or even thought about. And this is a way, obviously, people within the solar industry can make a difference. There's a similar company or nonprofit called Grid Alternatives that does something similar in different locations. Not Puerto Rico. I think they do in Mexico and some other places.
Yeah.
So it was amazing to see like after we installed the panels, like how happy these people were, and like the difficulty of like when a situation came where there was no power and what they had to do to be able to survive was really interesting to hear. And everyone had different sort of medical needs and to learn about that, and they were very appreciative to meet everyone. Then they wanted to learn more about us as well, so it was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and you guys at Renew Energy, you've been involved in projects with social impact also, right? Like with I think the New York Housing Authority, is that right? Like you're a big proponent of community-based solar and sort of empowerment of people and with,
Definitely. All about solar and empowerment. So we focus on community solar. If people are not familiar with community solar, it's basically a way of giving solar to people who do not have access to solar. So usually like that's people who like, live in apartments, or maybe their roof is not suitable for solar due to like the roof condition or shading. We're doing actually one of the first projects with the New York Housing Authority in Harlem, which we're actually starting construction on Monday. It's been a labor of love, I would say. We won the engagement with the New York Housing Authority 7 years ago, and it's
wow.
20, yes. So,
Wow.
I mean, it's one of their first solar projects, and it's extremely complicated. It's the first of its kind. It's on 25 buildings in two housing developments in Harlem. The great thing about it, it's a basically a public-private partnership. NYCHA, which is the New York Housing Authority, which is actually, I think, the second or third largest building owner in New York City in the five boroughs, is getting a lease payment to basically use their roofs for solar. And then we're providing discounted solar energy between 20 to 30% to low moderate income households in New York City. We also organized two clean energy job fairs with NYCHA residents. And I think it was around between 8 to 10 people received jobs in the clean energy industry in New York that were NYCHA residents, and some of them will be actually participating in the construction of the solar project that we're doing. So it's an amazing project. It was extremely complicated to structure, and obviously like the investor needs to make a certain return, and the complexity of building in Manhattan too has its own unique challenges, and there's only very few EPCs that are involved. And even the mayor of New York City, Mayor Adams, put a press release about this project because it's the first of its kind, and we believe that other affordable housing in other parts of the country and in New York City, this could be the model or platform going forward. It's a community solar project. As I mentioned, like we're working a lot in community solar. I think it's a great way of basically investing in the local community, and then you have distributed solar as well, so that helps with reliance of the grid as well. And obviously, I think community solar is going to be one of the faster growing parts of the solar industry, especially as different states get educated. And New York's been one of the big states for community solar, with I think I'm going to be wrong on the numbers, I'm sure, but 4 to 5 gigawatts of community solar have come online to date. So it's been a great like economic opportunity, and I've learned a lot from this New York Housing Authority project.
I bet you learned a ton. 7 years between, let's do it in
Yeah.
implementation starting, man. And I mean, that's, to some people, that's probably a fast time scale, but it's like, wow, 7 years. But, an example like that, when it's completely fully deployed and, delivering to all the expectations and promises that have been said, I think that'll be a great groundbreaking example that will accelerate other such projects all over the country. So I hope so anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And just to give you an idea, like it took us 7 years, but the actual construction time is probably only like 2 months.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So,
wild.
like,
That's
and that's
wild.
too like some of the things that is slowing solar energy deployment in the US is that there's just so much regulation when it comes to
Mhm.
permitting and approvals and interconnection. um that I know like people are trying to figure out how can we expedite things, because honestly like solar panels are not that complicated, and the whole processes shouldn't be taking a long time. I mean, what we're seeing in all our projects is that everything's just taking a lot longer. Then you have different incentives keep changing.
Yeah.
You had like the Inflation Reduction Act, which was like back in 2025 or 24 in August. And, they were just finalizing the regulations at the end of 2024. Now you have a new administration, that wants to change the incentives or reduce the incentives. Also, you have an environment of higher interest rates. So the constant changing has made things obviously something you would think is very basic, solar panels, inverters, and racking. Like to me, it's not that complicated, but unfortunately, it's with regulation and with incentives, it's gotten more complicated than it should be, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know that like also for community solar, I mean, like for example, in California, the utility can be very challenging, right? In terms of things really going at a much faster speed. Um, but I'm wondering, as a way to think about that question, does will the technology in some ways evolving in solar and as the technology advances for panels and how people even get solar energy, is that going to outstrip some of these impediments, do you think, to growth, whether it be regulatory environment, interest rates, or utilities, or whatever it might be?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think obviously like the utility of today has to change and transition to what things are going to be in the future. And obviously, like the utilities have to be incentivized to make those changes. And, it's very disappointing that the California PUC said no to the community solar program, which would have been the largest community solar program in the country with 7 gigawatts that they said no to in May of last year. Um, CCSA, which is the I think it's Community Coalition. I'm totally messing it up, but basically it's one community solar project which is 5 megawatts. AC provides 14 million of economic activity, and it's all privately financed. And they actually came up with a study. If you did 7 gigawatts in California of community solar, it would lower like electricity rates in California by 20% without any additional investment. Unfortunately, obviously, I agree with you. Like technology innovation is going to happen probably to help these sorts of impediments. And I think what we're starting to see in the US is electricity rates are starting to go up and going up dramatically, which it hasn't in a long time. And we're actually what we're seeing is a lot of like customers, whether it be residential or commercial customers, are like, we want to look at solar because we hear it's like the cheapest form of electricity. Can you help us do that? So I think we're gonna see more of that and people demanding like, why is electricity like so expensive? And
Mm.
people wanting to basically control their electricity, obviously like pricing, because that's one of the biggest expenses for any business or residential household. So it's amazing to me now, like, because we're seeing like how dramatically electricity prices are going up, that people want to look at solar, they want to look at storage, they want to be independent from the grid, energy freedom, which we haven't talked a lot about in the US. But if you go to Puerto Rico, they're talking about energy independence, energy freedom all the time because they're in an island where they're constantly losing electricity. They're dealing with obviously tropical storms and hurricanes, and where they haven't had electricity for months. And so they see the impact that that has. But now what we're seeing is a lot of Americans are seeing their electricity prices go up dramatically, and they're trying to figure out how can we save. And I think you're going to continue to see technology innovations. I think we talked about this in the pre-call, like, paint, curtains, windows in the future, obviously like
Yeah.
tile and everything is going to be able to, you're going to be able to absorb the sunlight and use it as electricity, and then you're going to be able to store it effectively. You know what this reminds me of is like, I might be dating myself by talking about this, like landlines and mobile phones. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything was like land, right? And then you needed that infrastructure, and then mobile came, and obviously you had some of the developing countries that never had that land infrastructure, and then suddenly they've been able to jump through with economic prosperity with the mobile networks. And you're going to see obviously like a lot of localized distributed energy microgrids, and people, and then also too, like you're electrifying transportation, electric vehicles are going to start being so much cheaper than your regular car.
Mhm.
And you're going to start seeing that with some of the cars that like Tesla's releasing in China, like BYD is like selling electric cars at 15,000, dollars. Obviously with tariffs and stuff, it's a lot more expensive here, but you're going to start seeing like the most expensive part of an electric car is the battery, and the battery prices are going down, exponentially. And I mean, I think, they've dropped like 60% the past 3 or 4 years, and you're going to continue to see that. You're going to continue seeing longer battery ranges. Then people, obviously, if they have solar and storage at their homes, why not get an electric vehicle that you could charge, and it's a lot cheaper than buying gas. So it's exciting.
Yeah, that's the dream for sure. Increase the range, lower the cost. It's just that's an easy proposition right there. And
Oh, for sure. And then I think I told you too, like I don't know how viable this, but there was like a car manufacturer in Holland that they put solar on all over their car, and they don't have to charge it, which I thought was interesting. Like, so they don't even need a charging station just based on, which I don't know how, I still think that might be early in the technology wise, but I'm just amazed like every day, like how many innovations are happening with the industry. And I can't keep up with all the innovations, even within just the solar industry. And when I go to some these conferences, like
yeah,
seeing battery technologies, like, I met like I was at a conference earlier this week with a zinc battery manufacturer, and they're getting a lot of business in Puerto Rico. They were telling me because of the whole perception with lithium ion about the flammability of the batteries, but the technology also for lithium has gotten a lot more advanced, and it's not as flammable as it was before. So it's interesting just to see like how much innovation is happening within the whole energy space.
no doubt. I mean, you can't love the solution because even traditional panels now, silica, they're mined, processed and all that kind of stuff, which is energy intensive, environmentally intensive, right? And I think that's a big aspect of solar that's being challenged right now is let's look at alternatives. There's, companies we've spoken to who don't mine. it's a chemical process that they're developing the materials that can harvest the sunlight, and have more efficient conversion. So it's very exciting, right? Because, we got to use solar as this. I loved how you describe it as a technology. That is what a great way to reference it. It is a technology, and as a technology, it's going to evolve and change. We've seen flexible solar that can be bent to, take advantage of the sun as it moves, right? Or as the planet moves, the sun's not moving. Well,
Yeah.
It's
but
all moving. It's all moving.
so
And then bifacial panels too has helped like production because then you're able to put, panels on both sides and then also too like racking where it actually moves with the sun. And now you're seeing that in environments where it snows a lot and there's hurricanes. So it's interesting,
yeah,
like whenever I think, and there's now like robotics and AI and everything and drones, right? For operations and maintenance. And you could look at the panel on a manual on a cell level based on, like inverters and everything's just happening so quickly. And I think it's happening fast now. I can't even imagine 5 to 10 years from now because just technology is like
yeah.
just increasing exponentially. There's innovation, and then especially with AI, like every week I feel like ChatGPT is getting a lot smarter. And yeah, it's just interesting to see that there's so much innovation just happening in the
Yeah.
industry and just in general.
That
Yeah,
was a
it's Mike was talking about this, and I know you're learning about this too, this perovskite solar. So then it's like this Moore's law where things just leap ahead advances. So you go from a solar panel that's, processed and made, processed in, not in the US, let's say in different countries, primarily in China, right? To like now you have an ink that's processed and made in the US. And then that creates like a whole other uh, ability for this technology to be taken up and deployed. Or for battery technology, there's some battery technology. We work with a company that has a non-metal battery, right? And that can be made from agricultural waste. And there are these different technologies, and I guess part of the challenge is how quickly, how quickly do they get adopted and deployed, and then you know what are the what are the things that get in the way of that but one of the things that you said also, and I would love your perspective on this, is that you're talking a lot about as it gets cheaper, then people that creates demand, people want it, right? So this is one of the things I think we talk about on the show, of relationship of business and essentially adoption of renewable energy in this transition. But I would love your insights, just from your background where you come, even working within community projects, of like how is like finance driving these things? How is cost and these kinds of things driving adoption? How do you see that unfolding?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, like as costs go down and as what we're seeing, like electricity prices are going up, basically it's a lot easier to sell people on solar. And then what we're noticing is that financing is getting more comfortable with potentially taking more risk, which I don't necessarily think it's more risk. So, like before it used to be everything had to be contracted for 20 years for financing institutions to get comfortable. Now they're comfortable with like more merchant risks. Actually, when community solar first started, like 8 to 10 years ago, like financing would only do it if it was a 20-year contract that the residential customer signed, which is like very difficult to sell a residential customer that they have this obligation and they don't have the panels actually on their household or roof. But then
Mhm.
now, like financing institutions are comfortable with no commitment. And then also, if you look, like this is actually some of the work that we did at Tesla Solar City more than 12 to 13 years ago, but still applies today, is most people will pay their electricity bill no matter what, because obviously they want to continue getting electricity. So, like the chances of actually default are pretty low. I mentioned obviously Moore's law. Actually, in the solar industry, what they call it is Swanson's law. It's the observation that the price of a solar PV module tends to drop 20% for every doubling of ship volume. And what we've seen is costs go down like basically 75%. every 10 years. And you don't see that with any other, real technology. You're seeing that obviously with energy storage, but when you talk about like natural gas or coal fired, I know, the new administration's talking about that. Those things are getting a lot more expensive. They're actually not cheaper. So it's interesting because it's not going to really compete. But at the same time, we have so much electricity demand that it makes sense to keep obviously older plants, even if they're not as economical. And yeah, there's just so much I could talk about. I mean,
Yeah.
with the potential. And then as far as solar as a technology, not a fuel, that I can't take credit
Okay.
for saying. I don't know if you know Bill Nussey, but he actually had a podcast and he's basically a VC he has called Tech Squared Ventures. And in his book, he would always say solar is a technology, not a fuel. And that was like one of the overarching things he said. And it's interesting. I never looked at it at that context, but it's really true.
Right.
And once it's funny because now on my podcast, I say it all the time. Then some people will come up to me, you always say solar is a technology, not a fuel. And I'm
They're
like,
crediting you.
Bill Nussey is actually the
Yeah.
person who said that.
You
And
get credit, Benoy.
yeah, it's
Right.
all about the
Just,
credit. He's the
just
one who like commercialized it in his book, which I learned a lot, where he talks about the solar industry and how it's gonna basically change the way we view energy going forward. So, and the other
Well,
thing I was gonna say too is like people are gonna be comfortable like buying from Amazon, right now, you know, and then it's going to be like do it yourself kits, and it's almost going to be like HVAC and all the other things in your home, energy efficiency. And it's just like it's amazing to me too, even over a short period of time, like our customers are a lot more educated. When I'm speaking about solar 10 to 15 years ago, they didn't know what you're talking about, but now
yeah.
people have like an idea a lot more. And I'm surprised too when you talk about your big corporations, like how sophisticated they are about energy and then about solar energy. And especially because like now a lot of corporates, especially the tech companies, have like they want to have a certain percentage of their generation renewable. And so they have a team to try to figure that out. So I don't know if that
Well,
answers your question.
what?
I was, talking about a lot of different.
Oh, it's insight. That's huge.
And I think the podcast too actually is great because you get to speak to like the smartest people in the industry doing a lot of different things, and it also brings great perspective because I'm able to see like the whole, even though I'm in the development side and the financing and we do renewable energy credit, it's like I talk to so many people within the industry, then I have access to all this research
Yeah.
that might not necessarily be all public. And then, so usually I'm like, I could see like a lot of the things that everyone's like talking about. Then also, or, emerging companies. There's so many exciting companies. Like met an AI company this past week that's basically trying to revolutionize project development, siting and permitting. And yeah, there's just so much innovation, I would say, that's
you can
happening.
tell us, so Benoy's going to give us some investment tips.
Yeah.
Great. So stay tuned in the show coming up a little later.
We can do that offline too. But you answered my question without me asking it because I was going to ask you what trends you're watching in renewables, energy, and finance. And I'm like, I don't need to answer the question now. It's already answered. And that's great.
There you
When
go.
I put solar on my house and I'm super glad I did. And the funny thing was, my motivation was I wanted to hedge against rising energy prices. That
Yeah.
was my major motivation, right? Because it's a way to fix your costs on electrical power. And the cost is related to I financed the installation. I financed this stuff. I
That's
didn't
awesome.
if I stroked a check for it, my cost would be zero, which is remarkable, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And I watched them do it. It's not the panels that was the hard part. It was the integration into, the wiring into the grid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I would say too is like, I think you both have an appreciation too, because you're in California. Electricity prices are so high
Mm.
in California compared to the rest of the country. I'm also too like, you have high solar irradiance. so a lot of sunlight, and it makes economical sense to
Hmm.
do solar. Obviously, like islands as well, like Hawaii, you mentioned Puerto Rico, like our prime areas, and
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
in Colorado, sunny here. And then there's a whole secondary market too, because now that I've got solar generation on the roof, now you can think about heat pumps, right? So you can think about alternatives to all these traditional systems. You can think about, you know, um, having your furnace be electrical as opposed to gas, right? You can think about convection stovetops, right? Instead of traditional gas. So there's a huge secondary market that I think is going to change things. It's going to create a lot of demand for, these products that run on electricity, because once you get that electricity cost, basically to zero, you're going to want to put as much on that as possible.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think like that leads to a lot of other obviously uses, as you said. And once you already get introduced to electricity, that's huge. And yeah, I think it's all eventually in the future, it's all going to be coupled into one solution, I feel. Like I
Yeah.
feel like it's interesting.
Yeah.
Like I think when a residential solar company comes to your home, like they should not be just selling you solar. They should be, selling, hey, like
Yeah.
energy efficiency, energy upgrades. How can we, turn certain, gas items into electricity?
Right.
Even like the EV too, like it's all should be kind of bundled. And that's what we kind of do on the commercial industrial side of our business is like
Mm.
we have like preferred partners and then bring them to that situation because it takes so long to build the relationship with the building owner. So yeah, you're definitely going to see that. And also actually, what's gotten people educated too is like things like Google Nest. And then like they get comfortable now looking at their energy usage. And then once you have a solar facility on your roof, you're probably looking at, hey, how many kilowatt hours did we produce today? Oh, today was a little was sunny
Yeah.
or cloudy. Like, how has that? So now, like, the customer has it in their mind where necessarily it was just turning on a switch, and now they're seeing like, oh, well, this is interesting, and this impacts like how much I pay, and then so
Yeah.
I have that app where I can go on and it tells me about my carbon offset. It tells me how much electricity I manufactured today. And I look at it like so dumb, but I love it.
also
You can also see your
gamification.
carbon footprint too, right? Like it's like you can see that. I think, it's interesting because I think about like messaging a lot. Like how do people adopt these things, right? And so sometimes things are way too dictated by politics when actually they're dictated by, you know, what do people want? They
Mhm.
want lower cost. They want to control their own thing, you know,
Yeah.
and like, and then however everything else falls out. So if they can get lower cost and control their energy, it doesn't really matter. That's what they're going to go for, right? Because
Hey,
it's just going to make sense. And they're like, oh yeah. So it's from a climate standpoint, of course, like this is going to be better for the like this is going to be better. This is the direction we need to go, but we need people to adopt these things a whole lot quicker. Like the adoption rate needs to speed up. So then, as the innovation speeds up, that'll help. But also as people go like, you know what, I can get solar, I get an electric car, I'll get a like electric stove. I'm not paying for energy anymore. I just save myself like 5 grand a year. Now I'm gonna take a vacation somewhere, it starts to really make sense to people, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really educating the customers. I think there's a lot of confusion, right? Because really, at the end of the day, like let's not even talk about the sustainability aspect, as you mentioned. Solar is the cheapest form of electricity in the
yep.
US and the fastest to get online. And unfortunately, like, yeah, it's a little confusing based on like, what different entities are saying because, you know, it's better for them that the energy transition takes longer. So, and it confuses the public,
Mm.
which is
Yeah.
unfortunate.
In Colorado, I don't actually use the energy that I make on my roof. I have to put it into the
Oh,
grid.
yeah, I
And
apologize. I thought, yeah.
I get, it's give, get, right? So I get back and at no cost what I put in. It's only if I need more power than I'm contributing that I pay. But they actually say you can't use the power off your house. Like,
That's the first time I've ever heard that actually.
yeah, yeah, strange, right? Because
It's something unique.
well, it even made it the point that if there's a power outage here, you because I happen to have a plug on the side of my house that's related to that. They're like, look, you're not even allowed to go out and use that plug if
Yeah,
there's a power outage. So, Touchstone Energy, which is my local energy provider, they have an energy outage. I'm not supposed to use the power I make on my house. Isn't that weird?
that is weird. That's the first time I've actually heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah, I have to look more into that. That's pretty
It was
unique.
probably a regulatory compromise, is my guess.
Oh yeah, for
You
sure.
know. So, because those utility companies have, significant capital investments in, their ability to generate electricity. And I can see that it does compromise their business model because over time, more and more and more people aren't going to be paying them, you
Right.
know, but they have a fixed cost because they have a plant, right? So they have
Yeah.
this fixed cost that's based on X number of houses buying energy for X number of years, and now that model is getting kind of turned on its head. So it's a problem because those utility companies, they provide the electricity for hospitals and street lights and red lights and all kinds of stuff that you just can't say, we'll just flip that over to solar tomorrow. It's like, no, we need that infrastructure to supply energy to those critical infrastructures. And these companies have done deals with local governments that basically give them visibility into profitability. So I see that as a headwind that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, definitely. Like you have to compensate. The grid is always going to be there, and you're going to have to compensate the grid no matter what. And I think
Yeah.
that's been a challenge because they've been trying to the utilities to put that cost too on the customers that have solar, and
Yep.
there's been a lot of debate and pushback about that. And then also, yeah, it's definitely like challenging because you have to have the utility to be there and provide these essential services, and they
Yep.
have to maintain it, and they have to make a certain return
Yeah,
as
that's right.
well. So it's challenging too, like the debating of this sort of topic, and but no
Yeah.
one wants to pay more.
Right.
Well, there's different
Yeah.
there's different interests that are involved, but
For sure.
uh, I know some of the ways that, also like the utilities get paid is they get paid for capital projects. And so like they have a funny way that they make money and that they can raise the rates on their customers is based on
Yep.
the commission saying, okay, we're going to improve this, capital expenditure to build transmission lines, whatever else. So
Right.
they're in this inherent conflict, but obviously there's something wrong with, like, in California, you got five people making a decision on community solar. That doesn't seem very democratic. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah,
Yeah.
that's challenging too because yeah. I mean, I don't know, like it's unfortunate about the California community solar because I think it would really help the grid in California. It would definitely like create a lot of economic opportunity. I think the challenge is like the general public, meaning the California citizens, don't understand like how great of a program and how much economic opportunity create without spending anything.
Well, Benoy, thank you very much. Wow. What a great conversation. Learned a ton. Really enjoyed talking with you, learning more. Renew Energy is keeping solar and storage projects moving forward. Not easy to do, complicated, evolving environments, but you've figured out how to hang in there and make it happen. And we appreciate you and the work you're doing. And we also thank you for reminding us that solar is uh, not a fuel, it's a technology. So
Well,
thank
thank
you.
you for having me, and it's been an amazing time, and I appreciate the work that you both are doing at Climate Hive, and look forward to the progression of your podcast and being a part of it. And thank you for letting me be one of the first few episodes.